Imagine standing at the edge of a desert valley, the sun burning above you, and hearing the report of trembling men who have just returned from a 40-day mission. Their faces are pale. Their voices shake. They say they have seen something so terrifying that it has destroyed their courage. They have seen men so massive that, in their own words, they felt like grasshoppers next to them. These men were not exaggerating. They had just encountered the Anakim, the ancient giants, whose name alone was enough to break the will of an entire nation. Who were these towering beings? Where did they come from? Why does the Bible mention them with such fear and reverence? And what happened to them in the end? Today we are going to uncover one of the most mysterious and chilling stories in all of Scripture. We are going to walk through the valleys of Hebron, climb the highlands of Canaan, and stand face to face with the giants that nearly stopped the people of Israel from ever entering the Promised Land. Before we begin this journey into one of the most ancient mysteries of the Bible, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, become a member to support this work, and activate the notification bell so you never miss a new revelation. Now, let us step into the shadow of the giants. To understand the Anakim, we must first understand the world they came from. The Bible introduces them in a context that is already wrapped in mystery. They are not the only giants mentioned in Scripture. They are part of a larger family of mighty men whose origins reach back to a time before the Great Flood. In the book of Genesis, chapter 6, we read about the Nephilim, beings born from a strange union that produced men of unusual size and strength. The word Nephilim itself carries a sense of dread, often translated as fallen ones or those who cause others to fall. After the flood, the Bible tells us that giants reappeared on the earth, and among them the Anakim became the most famous and the most feared. Their very name comes from a man called Anak, a descendant of Arba, who was considered the greatest of the giants of his time. The city of Hebron, one of the oldest cities in the world, was originally called Kirjath Arba, meaning the city of Arba, in honor of this towering ancestor. So when we speak of the Anakim, we are speaking of an entire bloodline of giants, a clan of warriors whose physical presence dominated the land of Canaan long before Israel ever set foot in it. The first time the Bible introduces us directly to the Anakim is in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. Moses, leading the Israelites through the wilderness after their miraculous escape from Egypt, sends 12 spies into the Promised Land. Their mission is simple: explore the land, observe its people, examine its cities, and bring back a report. They travel for 40 days, walking through valleys, climbing hills, and tasting the fruit of a land flowing with milk and honey. They cut down a single cluster of grapes so large that 2 men have to carry it on a pole between them. Everything they see proves that God's promise is true. The land is good. The land is fertile. The land is rich beyond imagination. But then they see something that shakes them to the core. They see the Anakim. They see men of enormous size walking through the cities of Hebron. They see warriors whose shoulders tower above ordinary men. They see fortified cities built with walls so high they seem to scrape the sky. And when the spies return to camp, 10 of them deliver a report soaked in fear. They tell the people that the land devours its inhabitants. They say that all the men they saw were of great stature. And then they utter the now famous words, "We saw the giants, the sons of Anak, who come from the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." This single statement changed the course of Israel's history. The people of Israel, who had seen the 10 plagues of Egypt, who had walked through the parted waters of the Red Sea, who had been fed manna from heaven and water from rocks, suddenly forgot every miracle they had ever witnessed. The mere mention of the Anakim was enough to paralyze them. They wept all night. They cried out against Moses. They threatened to choose a new leader and return to Egypt. They preferred slavery in a familiar land over the possibility of facing these giants in a free one. Only 2 of the 12 spies, Joshua and Caleb, stood firm. They tore their clothes in grief and pleaded with the people to trust God. They reminded them that if the Lord delighted in them, He would bring them into the land and give it to them. They told the people not to fear the inhabitants of the land, for their defense had departed from them, and the Lord was with Israel. But the people did not listen. And because of their unbelief, that entire generation was condemned to wander the wilderness for 40 years until every adult who had refused to trust God had died. The Anakim, without lifting a single weapon, had defeated Israel through fear alone. But who exactly were these Anakim physically? What did they look like? The Bible gives us several clues, and they are extraordinary. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses describes them as a people great and many, and tall as the Anakim. He compares them to other giant clans like the Amim and the Zamzummim, suggesting that the Anakim were part of a broader category of giant peoples scattered across the ancient Near East. The text emphasizes again and again that they were tall, strong, and terrifying. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, we are told that these giants were considered like the Anakim, which became the standard of comparison for any unusually large people. To be like the Anakim meant to be at the very top of the scale of human size and strength. Later in the Bible, we encounter Og, king of Bashan, who is described as the last of the remnant of the giants. His iron bed was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, which translates to roughly 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. If his bed was that size, his body must have been monstrous. Some scholars believe that Og was a direct descendant of the same giant bloodline that produced the Anakim, perhaps even a distant relative of the original family of Enoch himself. The famous Goliath, the Philistine warrior defeated by young David, is also believed by many scholars to be a descendant of the Anakim. When Joshua and the Israelites finally entered the Promised Land and began to drive out the Anakim from the hill country, the Bible tells us in Joshua chapter 11 that some of them fled to the cities of the Philistines. Specifically, they fled to Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Centuries later, when David faced Goliath in the valley of Elah, the Philistine champion came from the city of Gath. His height was 6 cubits and a span, which translates to roughly 9 feet and 9 inches, or about 3 meters tall. The connection is unmistakable. Goliath was likely one of the last remnants of the Anakim, a final echo of the giant clan that had once terrorized the land. And David, a young shepherd with nothing but a sling and 5 smooth stones, brought him down in the name of the Lord. The defeat of Goliath was not just a military victory. It was the symbolic end of the age of the giants, a moment when faith finally triumphed over the terror that had haunted Israel for generations. But let us return to the moment when Israel finally faced the Anakim head-on. After 40 years of wandering, a new generation rose up. Moses had passed the leadership to Joshua, and the people were ready to enter the land. They crossed the Jordan River on dry ground, just as their parents had crossed the Red Sea. They conquered Jericho through worship and trumpets. They defeated city after city through the power of God. And then came the moment of truth. They had to face the Anakim. In Joshua chapter 11, we read these powerful words, "And at that time came Joshua, and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Enoch, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There was none of the Anakim left in the land of the children of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod there remained." Think about the magnitude of this moment. The very giants that had terrified an entire nation. The men who had reduced grown warriors to grasshoppers in their own eyes were defeated. And they were not defeated by superior weapons or larger armies. They were defeated by a people who had finally learned to trust their God. The role of Caleb in this story deserves special attention. Caleb was one of the two faithful spies who, 40 years earlier, had stood against the report of fear. Now, as an old man of 85 years, he came to Joshua and asked for a specific piece of land. He did not ask for an easy plain or a quiet valley. He asked for the mountain of Hebron, the very stronghold of the Anakim. He said, "Give me this mountain, of which the Lord spoke in that day." He remembered what he had seen 40 years before, and he was ready to finish what his generation had failed to begin. Caleb went up to Hebron with his sword and his faith, and he drove out the 3 sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai. Imagine the courage of an 85-year-old man marching against the descendants of giants. Imagine the faith of a man who had waited 4 decades to claim a promise. Caleb is one of the most inspiring figures in the entire Bible, and his victory over the Anakim is a testament to what happens when faith refuses to die. Now, let us pause for a moment and consider the deeper meaning of all this. The story of the Anakim is not just a historical account of giants in the ancient world, it is a spiritual lesson that speaks to every generation. The Anakim represent the obstacles in our lives that seem impossible to overcome. They represent the giants of fear, doubt, addiction, illness, financial ruin, broken relationships, and spiritual oppression. They represent the moments when we look at the challenges before us and feel like grasshoppers. The lesson of the Anakim is not that giants do not exist. The lesson is that giants can be defeated. The lesson is that God is greater than any giant we will ever face. The lesson is that the size of our problem is irrelevant when compared to the size of our God. If you are watching this video right now and you feel like you are standing at the edge of your own valley, facing your own Anakim, take heart. The same God who delivered the giants of Canaan into the hands of Joshua and Caleb is the same God who walks with you today. If this message is touching your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, become a member, and activate the notification bell. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful biblical stories to thousands of people around the world. There is another fascinating element to the story of the Anakim that often goes unnoticed. The Bible mentions that the spies found the Anakim living in 3 specific cities. Hebron, Debir, and Anab. These were not random locations. They were strategic strongholds in the highlands of Judah. Hebron in particular was a city of immense significance. It was the city where Abraham had pitched his tent. It was the city where Sarah had been buried in the cave of Machpelah. It was the city that would later become the first capital of King David. The fact that the Anakim had taken over this sacred ground adds another layer of meaning to the story. The giants were not just occupying random land. They were occupying the very places where the patriarchs had walked, where the covenant had been remembered, where the promises of God had been planted. When Caleb drove them out of Hebron, he was not just conquering territory. He was reclaiming spiritual heritage. He was restoring the land to its rightful destiny. The mystery of the origin of the Anakim is something that has fascinated scholars and theologians for centuries. Where did they come from? How did they grow so large? Were they truly descendants of the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6? Or were they simply an unusually tall human population? The Bible does not give us a complete genealogy, but it does provide hints. In Numbers chapter 13, the text says that the children of Anak come from the giants, using the same Hebrew word, Nephilim, that appears in Genesis. This suggests a direct link between the antediluvian giants and the post-flood Anakim. Some traditions hold that after the flood, the giant bloodline somehow continued through the descendants of Noah, perhaps through a wife or daughter who carried the genetic legacy. Other interpretations suggest that the term Nephilim was used more broadly to describe any people of unusual size or strength, regardless of supernatural origin. Whatever the case may be, the Bible clearly presents the Anakim as something more than ordinary humans. They were a unique race, a people set apart by their physical stature, a living reminder of an ancient mystery that predated even Abraham. Archaeological discoveries have added even more intrigue to the story. In the regions where the Anakim once lived, archaeologists have uncovered massive structures, oversized doorways, enormous tombs, and weapons that seem to be designed for hands much larger than those of average men. Some of the cyclopean walls of ancient cities like Hebron and Bashan, built with stone so massive that modern engineers struggle to explain how they were lifted, have been attributed by some researchers to the giant clans of antiquity. The Bible itself mentions that Og, the giant king of Bashan, ruled over 60 fortified cities with high walls, gates, and bars. These were not small villages. These were massive strongholds, suggesting a civilization of considerable power and engineering skill. The Anakim were not just tall warriors. They were a sophisticated people who built cities, established kingdoms, and exercised dominion over vast territories. Their defeat was not just a military victory for Israel. It was the end of an entire civilization, the closing of a chapter in the history of the ancient world. Let us pause for a moment and imagine the scene more vividly. Picture the ancient city of Hebron, perched on the rugged hills of Judah. The walls are made of enormous stones, each one weighing several tons, fitted together with such precision that no mortar is needed. The gates are tall enough for a chariot to pass through with room to spare. Inside the city, the streets are wide, the houses are large, and the inhabitants walk with the calm confidence of those who have never known defeat. These are the Anakim. Their hair is long, their beards are thick, their arms are corded with muscle. They carry spears the size of weaver beams and shields that an ordinary man could not even lift. Their voices boom across the valleys, and when they laugh, the sound rolls down the hills like thunder. For generations, no army has dared to challenge them. The surrounding peoples pay tribute, offer their daughters in marriage, and bow before their power. The Anakim have become a legend in their own time, a living symbol of invincibility. And then one day, a small group of dusty travelers appears on the horizon. They are shepherds and former slaves. They have no armor, no chariots, no siege engines. But they have something the Anakim do not have. They have the living God walking before them. And that, in the end, makes all the difference. There is also a profound contrast in the story between how the 10 spies and the 2 faithful spies described the same reality. The 10 said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." The 2 said, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." They saw the same giants. They walked the same land. They tasted the same fruit. They measured the same walls. But they came back with 2 completely different reports. Why? Because vision is not just about what your eyes see. Vision is about the lens through which you interpret what you see. The 10 spies looked at the giants through the lens of fear, and so the giants seemed unconquerable. Joshua and Caleb looked at the giants through the lens of faith, and so the giants seemed defeatable. The same is true in our lives. 2 people can face the exact same situation, and one will be crushed by it while the other will rise above it. The difference is never the situation. The difference is always the lens. If you want to overcome the Anakim in your own life, you must first change the way you see them. You must stop measuring them against your own strength and start measuring them against the power of God. It is also worth noting how the Anakim are remembered in later Jewish tradition. In texts outside the canonical Bible, such as the Book of Enoch and various rabbinical writings, the giants are described in even greater detail. They are portrayed as beings of immense pride who oppressed the weak, devoured resources, and corrupted the earth. They are often associated with a spirit of rebellion against God, a refusal to acknowledge their Creator. This spiritual dimension helps us understand why God commanded their complete destruction. The Anakim were not just physically dangerous. They represented a spiritual contamination that had to be removed from the land before Israel could establish a covenant community there. The conquest of the Anakim was, in a sense, a divine cleansing, a preparation of sacred ground for the unfolding of God's plan of redemption. As we approach the end of our journey, let us reflect on one final detail. The Bible tells us that even after Joshua and Caleb had driven the Anakim out of the hill country, a remnant survived in the cities of the Philistines. This is significant because it shows that the giants were never completely eliminated. Some of them escaped, and their descendants continued to harass Israel for generations. Goliath was one of them. His 4 giant brothers, mentioned in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 21, were also descendants of this remnant. One of them, named Ishbi-benob, almost killed King David in battle. Another, a giant with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, was struck down by Jonathan, the son of David's brother Shimei. These battles continued throughout the reign of David, until finally, the last of the giants was destroyed. The age of the Anakim was over. The shadow that had haunted Israel for centuries was finally lifted. But the lesson of their story remains, written in the pages of Scripture forever. What can we take away from this ancient tale of giants? First, we learn that fear is the greatest enemy. The Israelites did not lose to the Anakim in battle. They lost to the fear that the Anakim inspired. An entire generation died in the wilderness because they could not see past their fear to trust the God who had promised them victory. Second, we learn that faith requires patience. Caleb waited 45 years to claim his mountain. He did not give up. He did not grow bitter. He kept his promise alive in his heart, and when the time came, he was ready to act. Third, we learn that no obstacle is too great for God. The Anakim were the most feared people on earth, and yet they fell before the people of Israel when Israel finally walked in obedience and faith. Whatever giants you are facing today, remember the story of the Anakim. Remember that the giants in your life are not bigger than the God who lives within you. The story of the Anakim is more than ancient history. It is a mirror for our own lives. Every one of us at some point will stand at the edge of our own promised land and see giants in the way. We will hear voices telling us that the obstacles are too big, that the enemies are too strong, that we are too small to overcome them. In those moments, we have a choice. We can listen to the 10 spies who saw only the giants, or we can listen to Joshua and Caleb who saw the God who was greater than the giants. We can let fear keep us wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, or we can let faith lead us into the land of promise. The Anakim were defeated not by stronger giants, but by a people who finally believed. And the same is true for you. The giants in your life will not be defeated by your own strength. They will be defeated by your faith in the one who has already overcome the world. As we close this powerful journey, I want to thank you for staying with me until the end. If this message has spoken to your heart, if it has given you hope, if it has reminded you that the God of Joshua and Caleb is still the same today, please do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a new biblical revelation. Become a member of the channel to support our mission of bringing these life-changing stories to the world, and activate the notification bell so that the moment a new video is released, you will be the first to know. Your engagement, your prayers, and your support are what make this work possible. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that no giant is too big for our God. Leave a comment below telling us what giants you are facing right now, and let this community pray with you and for you. We are all in this battle together, and together with faith in the living God, we will see every Anakim in our lives fall. May the Lord bless you. May He strengthen your heart. May He give you the courage of Caleb and the faith of Joshua. And may you walk into your own promised land, knowing that the same God who toppled the giants of old still goes before you today. Until the next video, stay in the Word, stay in prayer, and never forget that you are more than a conqueror through Him who loved you. The giants of your past do not define your future. The fears that whisper in the night are no match for the voice of the one who calls you by name. Whatever valley you are walking through, whatever mountain rises before you, whatever Anakim still stands in your way, remember this. The God who tore down the walls of Jericho, who parted the waters of the Jordan, who cut off the giants from the mountains of Judah, is the same God who lives in you today. Walk forward in faith, speak the promises out loud, and watch as every giant in your life falls one by one in the mighty name of the Lord.